So, I'm Eric, a neighbor to this young couple. I'm 45 years old, live with my wife, and have wonderful kids who are already in college. I'm a simple guy, work a regular 9 to 5, and spend my weekends fixing things around the house or having a BBQ with friends. My wife Linda and I have been married for over 20 years, and we've built a comfortable life together here in this quiet suburban neighborhood. We know almost everyone on our street and often get together for block parties or just to chat over the fence. One fine day, new neighbors moved in next door, John and Miranda. They seemed like a very nice, sweet couple, but they were a bit odd. John was a quiet guy, always friendly but a bit reserved. Miranda, on the other hand, was outgoing and often waved hello or stopped to chat with Linda. They were both in their early 30s and had moved here from out of state for John's job. Their house was a charming 2-story with a picket fence and a garden that Miranda quickly started tending. At first, everything seemed perfect. They hosted a housewarming party and invited the whole neighborhood. I remember thinking they were going to fit in just fine. But then, strange things started happening. One day, Linda and I were sitting on our porch when we heard shouting coming from their house. It was loud enough to catch our attention, and moments later, John came storming out. He looked distraught, his face red with anger and frustration. He got into his car and started banging his head against the steering wheel. This went on for about 3 times, each lasting a minute. Linda and I were shocked, not sure what to do. Eventually, he just drove off, leaving us sitting there in silence. Then, day by day, we heard more and more shouting, strange behavior from John and Miranda. One evening, we heard a loud crash and rushed outside to see Miranda standing on their front lawn, screaming at John, who was cowering near the porch. She was throwing his clothes out of the house, yelling about something we couldn't quite make out. John just stood there, taking it all, his head down. It was a pitiful sight. Another time, Linda saw Miranda grab John by the arm and drag him into the house. He didn't resist, just followed her like a lost puppy. We could hear the shouting even from our kitchen. It was always Miranda who was loud and aggressive, while John remained quiet and submissive. Linda was getting worried, suggesting that maybe we should call someone, but we didn't want to interfere in their personal matters. The third incident was the most disturbing. I was out mowing the lawn when I saw John sitting on their porch steps, a fresh bruise on his cheek. He was staring off into space, looking completely defeated. Miranda came out, yelling at him about some minor chore he hadn't done. She slapped him across the face, and he just took it, no reaction at all. That night, Linda and I couldn't stop talking about it, feeling helpless and unsure of what to do. But then, I don't remember how it happened, but my wife and I went to their house, and only Miranda was there. We chatted, and she seemed perfectly normal, like nothing was wrong. As we were getting ready to leave, some guy arrived who acted as if he and Miranda were husband and wife. He slapped her on the butt, which was very wild for us to see. Miranda didn't even flinch, just laughed and introduced him as a friend from work. After we left their house, my wife and I talked about it for 3 hours. We couldn't wrap our heads around what we had just seen. Naturally, we thought we should ask John about it. Maybe they have an open relationship. It's becoming popular among the youth these days. All that child-free stuff, all that nonsense for liberals from California, but we also didn't want to pry too much, fearing we might make things worse. So I got into my Ford F-150 and decided to go to the diner. I've read so many different stories on Reddit that I wanted to share this story and ask you what I should do. Should I intervene? Or maybe it's not worth it. So the comments on my previous post were divided into 3 camps. Do nothing, tell the husband, and hint to the husband about how he feels about open relationships and such. If he responds very negatively, then tell him the truth. I liked the last option. It seemed like a good way to ease into it without causing too much chaos right off the bat. Some folks were really adamant about not getting involved, saying it's none of our business. But come on, how can you just watch something like that and do nothing? I wanted to talk to John, but somehow we never managed to catch each other. Either he was busy or I was busy. It was like we were on different schedules. I'd see him coming home late at night looking exhausted, or leaving early in the morning when I was just getting my first cup of coffee. Linda and I even thought about inviting them over for dinner again, but something always came up. It was like fate was keeping us apart. Meanwhile, the guy who came over when we were at the neighbor's house started coming almost every day when John wasn't home. Of course, it was strange that he came over when the husband wasn't there. It didn't seem like a cuckold situation or an open relationship. It was unclear. I'd see his car parked out front almost every afternoon. He was a tall, burly guy with a swagger that just screamed trouble. Every time I saw him, my gut twisted. It was obvious he wasn't just a friend. My wife discouraged me from telling John anything, saying it's their life and all that, like, why get involved? Linda has always been more of the live and let live type, but this felt different. I mean, we're talking about a marriage here, not some high school drama. But she was adamant, saying it would only bring trouble to our doorstep. I knew she had a point, but it didn't sit right with me. One day, we met in town, both standing in line, me and John. I thought this might be the moment to find out what's going on with them and possibly help. So we started talking. I won't lie, this guy is about 58, skinny and wears glasses, an ordinary nerd, while I'm 511. Muscular, never smoke or drink. We agreed to go bowling. I figured it'd be a good way to bond without diving straight into heavy topics. After some time, we met up. I had a free day and decided to call John, but he said, "Oh, would you mind if we go to the gym instead? I've always wanted to work out but never dared." I agreed. The gym is my second home, so I figured I could show him a thing or two. We talked there, and I asked him about what's been going on, like why they argue so much. He said, "It's complicated. My wife expects more from me, but I can't deliver." I felt sorry for him because I didn't really get much information about how he would feel if someone else was sleeping with his wife. You know, it's hard to ask about such things. He seemed so down and defeated, like life had just kicked the shit out of him and kept on going. We worked out for a while, me spotting him as he struggled with the weights. He tried to keep up, but it was clear he was out of his element. We finished up and grabbed a couple of protein shakes at the juice bar. John opened up a bit more, telling me how Miranda was always on his case about something. She wants me to be more successful, more assertive, but I'm just not that guy, you know? He said, looking like a kicked puppy. It was tough to watch. I wanted to hint at the whole open relationship thing, but it felt wrong to do it then and there. I figured maybe it wasn't the right time. Maybe I needed to get to know him better first. So, we agreed to meet up again, maybe go bowling like we originally planned. Back home, Linda was waiting for me. "How'd it go?" she asked. I told her about our gym session, about how John seemed so beaten down. "I don't know, babe," I said, shaking my head. "I think we need to help him, but it's tricky." Linda just nodded, looking concerned. She didn't say much, but I could tell she was starting to see my side of things. The next week, John and I met up for bowling. It was a quiet night at the alley, just a few folks scattered around. We got a lane, ordered a couple of beers, and started playing. John was terrible at first, gutter ball after gutter ball, but he loosened up after a while, started getting a few pins down. We laughed and joked around, and it felt good to see him smile for once. After a few games, we sat down to take a break. I figured this might be the right moment to bring it up. "Hey, John," I said, trying to sound casual. "What do you think about open relationships? You know, like some couples do these days?" He looked at me confused. "Why do you ask?" he said, sipping his beer. I shrugged, trying to play it off. "Just something I read about recently. Seems like a lot of people are into it nowadays." John shook his head. "Not for me, man. I couldn't handle that. I'd be too jealous, too worried all the time." He laughed, but there was a sadness in his eyes. "Why, you and Linda thinking about it?" he asked, half joking. "Nah, just curious," I said, but my mind was racing. If John felt that way, then what was going on with Miranda and that other guy was definitely not something he was okay with. I decided to back off for now, not wanting to push too hard too fast. As we wrapped up our night, I felt a mix of relief and dread. At least I knew where John stood, but it made the whole situation even more complicated. Linda and I talked about it again when I got home. She still wasn't keen on getting involved, but she saw how much it was bothering me. "Just be careful," she said, hugging me. "We don't want to make things worse." The next few days were tense. I saw the other guy's car at John and Miranda's house more frequently, and it was eating me up inside. I wanted to tell John so badly, but I knew I had to be smart about it. I didn't want to blow up their lives without being sure it was the right thing to do. One evening, I saw John out front, looking more down than usual. I walked over, trying to think of the right words. "Hey, John," I said, clapping him on the shoulder. "How are things going?" He sighed, shaking his head. "Not great, Eric. Not great at all. I hesitated, then decided to take a chance. Listen, John, if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here for you. No judgment, just a friend who cares. He looked at me, and for a moment, I thought he might open up. But then he just nodded, thanking me quietly before heading back inside. Once, Miranda became completely brazen. She came to my wife with what I understand was her lover, wanting something. My wife told me about it, but I can't remember what exactly it was they wanted. Anyway, this just pushed me over the edge. I've been thinking about it for a while, and this was the final straw. I decided to tell John everything. I mean, a man can only take so much watching from the sidelines. So I met him in town one day, and I invited him for coffee. We sat down at a small cafe, and before I could even start, he dropped a bombshell on me. He told me that just yesterday he proposed to his wife. I was shocked, but he was very cheerful, glowing with happiness. He went on about how Miranda said yes and how they were planning to renew their vows in some fancy ceremony. He said he had to run and left before I could even get a word in. I was left sitting there, coffee untouched, in complete shock. How could he be so blind? I went home and told Linda everything, and she was livid. What a bitch Miranda is. We need to tell John right now, she said. Even though she was initially against getting involved, she was now all for it. I called John and told him I had something important to discuss. I thought about asking him to come over when that guy was at his house, but I figured that might end badly. Instead, I waited until the evening after work. We met at a quiet bar downtown. John was still smiling, still glowing from his proposal. I didn't waste any time. I told him everything directly, about Miranda's lover, the fights, everything. The smile immediately disappeared from his face. He looked like someone had punched him in the gut. Without saying a word, he got up and left. Maybe I imagined it, but it seemed like he cried. I just sat there feeling like the world's biggest asshole, but knowing it had to be done. 2 days passed without any news, and then, boom, my wife calls me at work, frantic. She said that John came home while that guy was there. Linda ran to their house and saw the guy angrily leaving. She went inside and heard Miranda screaming and crying. Miranda ran down the stairs from the second floor shouting, "Sweetie, where are you going?" She was shouting this to her lover, not her husband. Linda stood in shock as John came down the stairs, his face covered in blood, smearing it from his nose all over. My wife helped him while Miranda continued her shrill yelling. When I arrived, I wanted to talk to John and offer him to stay at our house so he could start the divorce process. But John just stopped answering calls. It was like he shut down completely. I saw him a few times looking like a ghost, but he wouldn't talk, wouldn't respond to my messages. A week later, my wife and I realized that this fool was trying to reconcile with Miranda. It was a pathetic sight. I saw him bringing her flowers, cooking her dinner, even trying to hold her hand when they went for a walk. She treated him like dirt, rolling her eyes and walking ahead of him. I wanted to shake him and yell, "Wake up, man!" But what happened next really amazed me. About 2 weeks after the fight between John, Miranda, and that guy, the guy started coming over to their house again. I couldn't believe it. I saw his car parked out front, and he'd stroll in like he owned the place. I can't even imagine what they're doing there. Honestly, I don't want to have anything to do with this family anymore. John seemed like a broken man, walking around like a zombie. I couldn't understand why he would let this happen, why he would stay with someone who treated him so badly. I wanted to help, but what more could I do? Linda and I decided it was best to keep our distance, but it was hard to watch. One evening, I was out in the yard, and I saw John and Miranda having what looked like a normal conversation. They were sitting on their porch, sipping wine and laughing. It was surreal. I wondered if he was in denial or just trying to hold on to some shred of hope. I remember one Sunday morning, I was out washing my truck, and I saw them getting ready to go to church. John was all dressed up in his best suit, and Miranda looked stunning in a dress. They looked like the perfect couple, but I knew better. I knew the truth. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. The whole situation left a bad taste in my mouth. I felt like I had done the right thing by telling John, but it didn't change anything. He was still stuck in that toxic relationship, and it seemed like there was no way out for him. I started to wonder if some people are just destined for misery, no matter what you do to help. So, yeah, I'm back. Hello, everyone. It's been a week, and we've had a lot of changes happen. Things have been crazy around here. It feels like we're living in a soap opera, and everyone's glued to their seats, waiting to see what happens next. The whole town is buzzing with gossip about John and Miranda. It's like nothing else matters around here anymore. As you can imagine, we're not the only neighbors who are shocked by what's going on with John and Miranda. Our whole town is looking at their family with suspicion. One day we went to the supermarket, the main supermarket in our town where everyone goes. My wife and I were there for groceries, and as we were leaving, we saw two guys, about 20 and 21 years old, harassing John and Miranda. They were using some very harsh words, and I didn't like it, so I stepped in. I look like a cowboy, just muscular and with modern weapons. Of course, you don't mess with guys like that. These young punks were calling John all sorts of names, telling him he was pathetic for staying with Miranda after everything. Miranda was just standing there, looking smug as ever. I walked up and got right in their faces. "You boys need to back off," I said, my voice low and steady. They looked at me, saw the determination in my eyes, and decided it wasn't worth it. They muttered a few more insults under their breath, but eventually walked away. When we got home, John called me to say thank you and suggested we meet up. I agreed, figuring it was about time we had a real heart-to-heart. We met at the same bar we'd gone to before. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. I could tell this whole mess was eating him up inside. When we sat down, I told him that I didn't want to give him any advice if he wasn't going to listen. And if he didn't want to change, I didn't want to waste my time. He heard this and said, "Yes, I'm ready to change. I want to be a man, not a wimp." I was glad to hear this and told him to answer all my questions honestly. He agreed, and I asked what the hell was going on and why that guy was coming to his place. "Is he sleeping with your woman?" I asked. John said yes, explaining that he masturbates in the corner of the room because it's the only way he can see his wife. And sometimes he even touches her. When I heard this, I realized this was rock bottom, the deepest pit. I was stunned. I've seen a lot in my life, but this was a new low. I told him he could stay with us and start the divorce process. He replied, "Why should I live with you?" I said so he wouldn't spend money, but he told me he makes $40,000. He shocked me more and more. He's the most non-standard person I've ever met, honestly. He went on to explain that he bought the house. His wife spends most of his money, and she doesn't work anywhere. She's living the high life off his hard-earned cash while he's stuck in this nightmare. It made my blood boil just hearing about it. This poor guy was getting taken for a ride, and he couldn't even see it. When I told my wife everything, you should have seen her face. It was more interesting than following the life of any movie star. So yes, he filed for divorce and rented an apartment. I haven't talked to him about it yet, but I think it's going to be very interesting. Linda was floored, her jaw practically on the floor. "This is like something out of a trashy TV show," she said. "I can't believe it's happening right next door." John moved out the next day. He called me to help him pack, and I could see the weight lifting off his shoulders as we loaded his stuff into a U-Haul. He looked like a man finally breaking free of his chains. We got him set up in a small apartment across town. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Linda and I visited him a few days later, bringing some homemade lasagna and a six-pack. We sat on his tiny balcony, looking out at the parking lot, and talked about everything. He seemed more relaxed, but there was still a sadness in his eyes. I asked him how he was holding up, and he shrugged. "Better," he said. "It's hard, but better." He told us that Miranda had already started calling and texting, begging him to come back. She was promising to change, saying she loved him and couldn't live without him. Typical manipulative bullshit. John knew better now, though. He was determined to see this through. "I've given her enough chances," he said, his voice firm. "I deserve better." You ever see someone finally stand up for themselves after being pushed around for so long? It's like watching a flower bloom. John was finding his strength, little by little. It was a hell of a thing to witness. Linda and I went home that night, feeling hopeful for the first time in weeks. Maybe John was going to be okay after all. But then, just as we were settling in for the evening, we got a call. It was John, sounding panicked. "She's here," he said. "Miranda's outside my apartment." We jumped in the car and drove over. Sure enough, there she was, banging on his door and screaming, "John, please, let me in, we need to talk." She was a mess, tears streaming down her face, mascara running. It was a pitiful sight. I got out of the car and walked up to her. "You need to leave," I said firmly. "He doesn't want to see you." She looked at me with wild eyes. "This is all your fault," she spat. "You turned him against me." I didn't flinch. "No, Miranda, you did that all on your own." She eventually left, but I could tell this wasn't over. John needed to stay strong. We went inside and found him sitting on the floor looking exhausted. "I'm so tired," he said. "I just want this to be over." "You're doing the right thing," I told him. "It's going to be tough, but you'll get through it." The next few days were rough. Miranda kept trying to contact John, showing up at his work, leaving messages on his phone. He changed his number, but she always found a way to reach him. It was like she couldn't accept that it was over. One night, John called me, his voice shaking. "She broke into my apartment," he said. "She's sitting on my couch right now, refusing to leave." Linda and I rushed over. Sure enough, there she was, looking defiant. "I'm not leaving until we talk," she said. "John, call the cops," I said. "This is trespassing." He nodded and dialed 911. Miranda screamed and threw a vase, shattering it against the wall. "You can't do this to me!" she shrieked, but John stayed calm, his hands steady as he held the phone. The cops arrived and escorted her out. It was a dramatic scene, but necessary. John needed to be free of her madness. After that, things finally started to settle down. John focused on his job, started working out more, and even took up a new hobby, woodworking. He said it helped him clear his mind. Linda and I supported him every step of the way, proud of how far he'd come. So, hello everyone. It's been about 2 weeks since my last post. Thanks to everyone for the support. I've been reading through the comments, and it's good to know there are folks out there who care about what happens to John. This whole situation has been one hell of a ride, and it's not over yet. Of course, there were constant conflicts between John and Miranda, and they always arose because of Miranda. One night, John called me, frantic. Miranda had taken his car keys and thrown them in the neighbor's pool because he refused to give her money for some shopping spree. I had to go over there, help him fish the keys out, and calm him down. Another time, she showed up at his apartment, banging on the door at midnight. She screamed at him for ruining her life, and then proceeded to trash his place. She broke a lamp, threw his clothes out the window, and even tried to smash his laptop. John was a mess, and I had to rush over and help him clean up the wreckage she left behind. The third incident was the worst. She somehow got into his apartment again and changed the locks while he was at work. When he got home, he found her lounging on his couch, acting like she owned the place. She refused to leave, and John had to call the cops to get her out. It was a huge scene, and the whole building was talking about it for days. We also found out that the guy who was coming over to see Miranda dumped her because she no longer took him to restaurants and bought him expensive things. This is absurd because, essentially, John was paying for someone to sleep with his wife. The nerve of that guy. Turns out, without John's money funneling through Miranda, the guy lost interest. It's ridiculous how far some people will go for a free meal and some luxury. Miranda's little fling was using her just as much as she was using John. This whole conflict with Miranda is very difficult for John. He's been dealing with so much emotional stress, the constant fights, the manipulation, it's all wearing him down. He's trying to stay strong, but you can see the toll it's taking on him. He's lost weight, and his eyes look hollow. It breaks my heart to see a good man like him being torn apart by someone who clearly doesn't give a damn about him. Many people commented on the previous post, asking why I'm helping him, saying this loser deserves it, and that if he can't stand up for himself, he shouldn't be helped. That's complete nonsense, because first and foremost, I'm a sincere Christian, and it's my duty. We're supposed to help our neighbors, not kick them when they're down. John's a good man who got mixed up with a bad woman. It could happen to anyone. It's my job to be there for him, to help him find his strength again. Also, this simp, as many call him, bought me a 2017 Lincoln Continental. Yes, for opening his eyes, he bought me this car. It was very nice of him. I was floored when he handed me the keys. I tried to refuse, but he insisted. "You've done more for me than anyone ever has," he said. "It's the least I can do." I have to admit it's a sweet ride. Linda thinks it's a bit much, but I'm grateful. It shows how much he appreciates the help, even if it feels like too much. I won't go into what he does for a living because I don't understand it at all. He mentioned cryptocurrency, and he's clearly good at it. But life is about balance, and you need to develop other skills too. His social skills were very poor, but I will definitely help him get out of this rut and become a real man. John's got a brilliant mind, no doubt about it. But all that book smarts don't mean much if you can't handle yourself in the real world. He's like a deer in headlights when it comes to dealing with people, especially someone as manipulative as Miranda. We've been working on it, though. I've been taking him to the gym, showing him how to lift weights, build some muscle. It's doing wonders for his confidence. He's starting to stand a little taller, look people in the eye. We've also been working on his social skills. Simple things like making small talk, handling confrontation without backing down. It's slow going, but he's making progress. One of the most important lessons I've been trying to teach him is to know his worth. Miranda's beat him down so much, he doesn't even realize he deserves better. We've had long talks about self-respect, about not letting anyone treat him like a doormat. It's like watching someone slowly come back to life. Every little victory, every time he stands up for himself, it's a step in the right direction. You know, it's funny how life works sometimes. A few months ago, John was just the quiet guy next door, and now he's become a big part of my life. Helping him has been frustrating and rewarding in equal measure. There are days when I want to shake him and tell him to snap out of it, but then there are days when I see that spark of determination in his eyes, and I know he's going to be okay. So a month has passed, and the court case has taken place. Now I'll tell you what happened. It's been a whirlwind of events, and things have finally started to settle down. John's divorce was finalized, and let me tell you, it was a long time coming. I know some of y'all have been following this saga from the beginning, and I appreciate all the support and advice you've given. It's been a roller coaster, but we're finally seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. The day before the court, John was a nervous wreck. He spent most of the day pacing around his apartment, rehearsing what he was going to say. Linda and I went over to help him prepare, bringing a big pot of Linda's famous chili to try and calm his nerves. We sat around his tiny kitchen table, going over every detail, every possible question the lawyers might ask. John was scared, and rightfully so. This was the moment that would decide his future, and he knew it. Linda kept reassuring him, patting his hand and telling him everything would be all right. "You've got this, John," she said. "Just tell the truth and let the judge see what kind of person Miranda really is." He nodded, but I could see the fear in his eyes. It was like he was preparing for battle, and in a way, he was. An hour before the court, we all met up outside the courthouse. John was dressed in a sharp suit, looking more confident than I'd seen him in weeks. But there was still that edge of nervousness. I clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Remember, you've got nothing to hide. Just be yourself and let the truth speak for itself." He nodded, taking a deep breath. Miranda showed up looking rough. Her once pristine appearance was now a mess of disheveled hair and tired eyes. She glared at John and me, muttering something under her breath as she walked past. Her lawyer didn't look much better, shuffling through papers and trying to make sense of what was happening. It was clear they weren't prepared for what was coming. The court itself was a tense affair. The judge, an older woman with a stern face, listened intently as both sides presented their cases. John's lawyer laid out all the evidence of Miranda's infidelity, her manipulative behavior, and her attempts to sabotage John's life. He even brought up the fact that she had changed the locks on John's apartment, trying to force her way back into his life. Miranda's lawyer tried to paint John as controlling and abusive, but the judge wasn't buying it. She saw through the lies and manipulation, her sharp eyes darting back and forth between Miranda and her lawyer. John stood tall, answering every question with honesty and clarity. It was clear he had nothing to hide, and the judge respected that. The result was better than we could have hoped for. John won. The judge ruled in his favor, granting him the divorce and ordering Miranda to stay away from him. She even had to pay back some of the money she had stolen from him over the years. It was a sweet victory, and you could see the relief wash over John's face as the judge made her final ruling. But the story doesn't end there. Miranda took the loss hard. She spiraled out of control, turning to hard drugs and eventually becoming homeless. It was a sad turn of events, but honestly, it wasn't surprising. She had always relied on others to support her, and without John's money, she had nothing left. John, on the other hand, started seeing a therapist and goes to the gym with me every day. The changes in him have been incredible. He's getting stronger, both physically and mentally. The therapy is helping him deal with all the trauma Miranda put him through, and the gym is building up his confidence. He's a new man, and I couldn't be prouder of him. He's even started dating again, something I never thought I'd see. There's a nice woman at our gym who took an interest in him, and they've been out a few times. It's still early days, but it's a good sign. John's finally starting to see that he deserves happiness, and he's not letting anyone take that away from him again. So now a year has passed. It's hard to believe how much has changed in such a short time. It feels like a lifetime ago that John was living in that toxic mess with Miranda. Now things are looking up for all of us. It's been a wild ride, but we've come out the other side stronger. John found a new girlfriend, Sarah. They met at the gym, where she worked as a trainer. She's kind, supportive, and completely different from Miranda. Sarah's been a breath of fresh air for John, helping him see what a healthy relationship looks like. They started dating about 6 months ago, and you could see the happiness in John's eyes. He was finally starting to believe that he deserved to be loved and respected. Not too long after they started dating, John decided to take the plunge and propose to Sarah. It was a simple proposal, nothing fancy, just the two of them at their favorite hiking spot. She said yes, and they got married a few months later in a small ceremony. Linda and I were there, along with a few close friends and family. Seeing John standing at the altar, looking at Sarah with such love and gratitude, was one of the most heartwarming moments I've ever witnessed. They make a great couple, and you can tell they're truly happy together. As for me, well, Linda and I had a baby. We welcomed a little girl into our family. Her name is Emily, and she's the light of our lives. It's been an adjustment, balancing late-night feedings and diaper changes with everything else. But it's all worth it. Emily's got Linda's eyes and my stubbornness, and we couldn't be happier. John's been great with her too, often coming over to help out or just to hold her while Linda and I get a moment's rest. John mentioned that he really wants to open a barbershop in our town. He wanted some sort of offline business and decided that it would be a barbershop. By the way, it's truly a barbershop with the best service. He'd always been good with people, and he figured it was time to put those skills to use in a way that wasn't tied to a computer screen. He found a little spot downtown, right next to the diner, and set up shop. The place looks fantastic. John put a lot of thought and effort into it, making sure it had that old-school barbershop feel with a modern twist. The leather chairs, the polished wood counters, the vintage barber pole out front. It's perfect. He hired a couple of top-notch barbers, and word quickly spread that John's barbershop was the place to go for a great cut and some good conversation. It's amazing to see John thriving in this new venture. The barbershop has become a community hub, a place where folks come not just for a haircut, but to catch up on local news and chat with friends. John's in his element, greeting every customer with a smile and making sure everyone feels welcome. It's clear he's found his calling, and he couldn't be happier. Reflecting on the past year, I can't help but feel proud of how far we've all come. John went from being a broken man, trapped in a toxic relationship, to a successful business owner with a loving wife. It wasn't an easy journey, but he made it through with strength and determination. He's a testament to the fact that no matter how bad things get, it's never too late to turn your life around. For me and Linda, having Emily has been a blessing. It's brought us even closer together, and we're cherishing every moment as we watch her grow. John's success with the barbershop has been a source of inspiration, showing us that with hard work and perseverance, anything is possible. So to anyone out there who might be going through a tough time, remember John's story. Remember that there's always hope, and that with the right support and a lot of determination, you can overcome even the toughest challenges. Life has a way of surprising us, of taking us down paths we never expected. But those twists and turns can lead to some pretty amazing places.